A surprising number of adults have been in a temporary financial season for most of their adult lives. Not 1 year. Not one rough stretch. Most of it. After this busy season, I'll start investing properly. After this move, I'll get organized. After the wedding, I'll clean up the debt. After daycare gets cheaper, I'll save more. After this job gets more stable, I'll finally build a real emergency fund. After the house stuff settles down, I'll start being intentional. That language sounds harmless. It sounds realistic, even mature. Life is messy, timing matters, and sometimes a season really is unusual. The problem is that a lot of people are not using temporary as a description. They are using it as a permission slip. A permission slip to postpone systems, delay investing, tolerate expensive chaos, and keep living as if their real financial life is going to begin later, after some cleaner, calmer, more adult chapter finally starts. And that chapter has terrible attendance. Nick here, and today I want to talk about one of the quietest ways people stay financially stuck, which is by treating the current phase of life like a waiting room. I want to talk about why this is just temporary can become a very expensive story, how short-term thinking quietly hardens into long-term patterns, and why some people do not fall behind because they are reckless. They fall behind because they keep postponing the part where structure was supposed to begin. What temporary mode actually does to money? Temporary mode is not just a mindset. It changes behavior. When people think a season is short-term, they stop trying to build for it. They just try to survive it. That sounds reasonable right up until the short-term season stretches into 18 months, then 3 years, then becomes one of several back-to-back life phases that never fully settle down. Here is what temporary mode usually looks like in real life. You do not optimize the bills because you will deal with all that later. You do not invest steadily because right now is weird. You do not fix the food system because this is not your permanent routine. You do not challenge the bad spending habits because life is unusually stressful. You do not simplify the accounts, automate the transfers, negotiate the insurance, restructure the debt, or create cleaner defaults because this is not the real version of life yet. So the current season gets treated like a financial layover. The only problem is that you are still spending real money in it. You are still making real decisions in it. And those decisions still compound, even if the life chapter feels provisional. That is the part people miss. Money does not care whether you consider this period temporary. The consequences still post. Why this mindset feels so sensible? Most people do not think they are avoiding financial structure. They think they are being practical. Of course, I am not focused on investing right now. I just had a baby. Of course, I am not tightening the budget right now. We just moved. Of course, the card balance is messy right now. It has been a chaotic few months. Of course, the spending is strange right now. Work is insane. Fair enough. The issue is not whether those explanations are real. Often they are. The issue is that adulthood does not usually move from chaos to perfect order in one clean transition. It moves from one imperfect season to another. A busy season becomes a family season. A family season becomes a house season. A house season becomes a career transition season. A career transition season becomes a caregiving season. Somewhere in there, something always needs fixing, replacing, planning, or paying for. So if your financial strategy depends on life becoming smooth before you start acting like the current season counts, you can lose a shocking number of years to waiting. A lot of people are not behind because they did not care. They are behind because they kept postponing structure until life looked less temporary than life actually is. The 2 ways people handle unstable seasons. Picture 2 people in their early 30s. Same general income. Same city. Same rough level of intelligence. Both of them are in a messy stretch of life. One just moved. One is dealing with family changes, work stress, and a budget that feels like it has too many personalities. Person A says, "This is not the time to build systems. I just need to get through this stretch." Person B says, "This is not the ideal time, so I need the simplest possible systems that can survive imperfect weeks." That sounds like a small difference in attitude. Financially, it is enormous. Person A delays investing because now is weird. Leaves spending loose because now is weird. Keeps too many subscriptions, too much admin drag, too many random purchases, too much financial fog because now is weird. Person B does not build a perfect life. They build a minimum viable one. Automatic transfer, even if it is smaller than they want. One food routine that works on bad weeks. Bills simplified. A little buffer protected. A few categories tightened. Nothing glamorous. Just enough structure that the season stops being financially shapeless. A year later, Person A still feels like they are about to get it together. Person B is not transformed, but they have traction. And traction matters more than people realize. Because wealth is usually not built by perfect seasons. It is built by systems that keep functioning through imperfect ones. The cost of waiting for the real phase to begin. Let's use numbers. Imagine someone delays investing $600 a month for 5 years because life feels too unstable to do it properly. They keep telling themselves they will start once the current phase ends. If they had invested that $600 monthly for 20 years at 8%, they would end up with roughly $353,000. If they wait 5 years and then invest the same amount for 15 years, they end up around $208,000. That is a difference of about $145,000. Not because they picked the wrong stock. Not because they were irresponsible. Because they kept telling themselves the current season did not count yet. And investing is only one example. The same delay logic shows up in building emergency savings, simplifying recurring expenses, paying down high-interest debt, learning how the accounts work, and creating routines that stop normal life from becoming expensive. Temporary mode delays all of it. That is why it can be so financially destructive even when it sounds completely reasonable in conversation. How temporary seasons become permanent leaks. There is another problem here. When people label a phase temporary, they often allow spending and inefficiency that would alarm them if it were labeled permanent. The expensive meal plan because things are hectic right now. The second storage unit because the move is in transition. The extra subscriptions because entertainment is how you are coping. The weak grocery system because the kitchen is not set up yet. The random convenience spending because once things settle down, this will stop. But then the season stretches. The habits harden. The costs normalize. And now the temporary setup has become the operating system. That is one of the most expensive shifts in adult life, when a workaround becomes a lifestyle without ever being consciously chosen. People think they are carrying a short-term exception. Often they are quietly installing a long-term default. Why people do not notice this happening? Because temporary mode removes the need to judge the current situation properly. If something is just for now, your standards get softer. The budget does not need to be sharp because this is not forever. The systems do not need to be clean because this is not forever. The spending does not need to be fully honest because this is not forever. The problem is that not forever can still last long enough to do real damage. And once enough time passes, your brain adapts. Now the mess does not feel temporary anymore. It just feels normal. The financial admin drag feels normal. The loose spending feels normal. The weak transfers feel normal. The fact that nothing is really compounding yet feels normal. That is where people lose years. Not in crisis. In drift. The emotional comfort of postponing standards. There is also a quieter emotional payoff here that people rarely admit. Calling the season temporary protects your self-image. You do not have to say, "This is how I'm living now." You get to say, "This is just a weird phase." That matters, because it lets people preserve an internal story where they are still the kind of person who will eventually be organized, strategic, calm, invested, on top of things, and financially solid. The current mess does not count against the identity because it is supposedly transitional. That is emotionally soothing. It is also a dangerous way to run money. Because if your identity stays aspirational while your behavior stays provisional, the gap can stretch for a very long time. You keep seeing yourself as someone who is basically on the verge of getting serious. Meanwhile, serious never becomes structural. Where this hurts most. This trap tends to do the most damage in 5 places. First, investing. People delay because they want to start cleanly, with enough room, enough knowledge, enough certainty, and enough emotional calm. That is a lovely fantasy. It also costs money. Second, debt. Temporary seasons are where ugly balances get excused. Not forever, just for now. Then, for now, becomes interest, and interest starts preserving the season long after the original stress should have ended. Third, fixed expenses. People accept too many recurring costs because it is just for this stage. But recurring costs are not great at leaving politely on their own. They settle in. Fourth, cash flow systems. Weak automation, sloppy account structure, inconsistent saving, scattered bills, poor visibility. All of this survives because the current chapter is not considered worth cleaning up properly. Fifth, identity. This one is the most subtle. Temporary mode lets people imagine they are financially stronger than their systems currently prove. That creates false confidence, weak urgency, and a very long runway for drift. What people who actually get stronger do differently. The people who build wealth through chaotic life phases are usually not calmer, luckier, or living in some magical friction-free season that nobody else has access to. They just stop waiting for life to become easy before building support into it. They treat each phase as real enough to deserve a working system. Not a perfect system, a working one. That distinction matters. A lot of people do not need a full financial reinvention. They need a version of financial structure that is simple enough to survive a busy season. A small automatic transfer. One debt payment rule. One spending boundary that works even when tired. One weekly cleanup habit. One decision to stop carrying an obviously temporary expense that has overstayed its welcome. That is how strength gets built in adult life. Not after the season. Inside it. What people who actually get stronger do differently. The people who build wealth through chaotic life phases are usually not calmer, luckier, or living in some magical friction-free season that nobody else has access to. They just stop waiting for life to become easy before building support into it. They treat each phase as real enough to deserve a working system. Not a perfect system, a working one. That distinction matters. A lot of people do not need a full financial reinvention. They need a version of financial structure that is simple enough to survive a busy season. A small automatic transfer. One debt payment rule. One spending boundary that works even when tired. One weekly cleanup habit. One decision to stop carrying an obviously temporary expense that has overstayed its welcome. That is how strength gets built in adult life. Not after the season. Inside it. The dangerous fantasy of the clean restart. One of the most expensive ideas in personal finance is the clean restart. The belief that after this chapter ends, you will sit down with a fresh notebook, a repaired nervous system, a calm calendar, a simpler life, and finally begin your real financial life from a place of clarity and discipline. Sometimes that happens. Usually life just rolls directly into the next chapter with the old systems still attached. That is why people who rely on restarts often stay in a loop. New month, fresh start. New season, fresh start. New year, fresh start. After this event, fresh start. After this move, fresh start. The clean restart becomes a substitute for steady structure. And steady structure is what actually changes things. What to do instead? If this is landing a little too hard, good. That means it is probably useful. Here is a better question then. When will life calm down enough for me to start? Ask, what would a workable version of my money life look like in this exact season? Not your ideal season. This one. If you are busy, what is the investing habit small enough to survive busy? If you are in transition, what is the spending rule that still gives the month shape? If the phase is expensive, what temporary costs need an actual expiration date instead of vague optimism? If the schedule is ugly, what can be automated so your future self is not making every decision from scratch? That is the move. Stop waiting to build your real financial life in the next chapter. Build a version of it that can survive this one. The part that should stay with you. A lot of people do not stay behind because they make one catastrophic decision. They stay behind because they keep telling themselves that the current season is not the real one yet. So they spend loosely, delay structure, postpone habits, excuse weak systems, and wait for a cleaner chapter to begin. That chapter often never arrives in the form they imagined. Life does not usually hand you a pristine financial starting line. It hands you a messy season and waits to see whether you can build something inside it anyway. That is the real game. Because the current phase is not a placeholder. It is your life. The money is real now. The habits are real now. The drift is real now. The compounding is real now. And if you keep treating the present like a waiting room, you may eventually realize you spent the most important years of your financial life preparing to begin it. That's it for this one. If this changed the way you think about just temporary seasons, hit subscribe and share this with someone who keeps postponing structure until life gets calmer, even though calmer has been running late for 6 years.